World War II wasn't just a war, it was a global turning point that reshaped nations and changed history forever. But how did it all begin, and what led to its devastating end? Let's dive into the timeline of the deadliest conflict in human history. In January 1933, Adolf Hitler was appointed Chancellor of Germany, marking the rise of the Nazi regime. By July 1937, war erupted between Japan and China, further destabilizing the world. Between March and September 1938, Germany annexed Austria and Czechoslovakia, defying international agreements. In August 1939, Germany and the Soviet Union signed the Non-Aggression Pact, dividing Eastern Europe. Just a month later, in September of 1939, Germany invaded Poland, sparking World War II. On September 3rd, 1939, Britain and France responded by declaring war on Germany, officially marking the start of the global conflict. The Soviet Union followed suit, invading Poland from the east. It was the beginning of a long and brutal conflict. From November 1939 to March 1940, the Soviet Union invaded Finland in what became known as the Winter War. Meanwhile, Germany began its rapid conquests. In April 1940, German forces invaded Denmark and Norway. The following month, in May of 1940, they launched an offensive against Belgium and Holland. Between May and June 1940, the Battle of France unfolded, leading to Germany's occupation of the country. Shortly after, in June 1940, Italy joined the war effort by invading France from the south. In June 1940, the evacuation at Dunkirk saw 330,000 Allied troops escape advancing German forces in a remarkable rescue operation. On June 22, 1940, Germany officially occupied France, marking the country's fall and solidifying Nazi control over much of Western Europe. From July to October 1940, the Battle of Britain was fought. The Royal Air Force successfully defended the UK against German air raids, preventing a Nazi invasion and marking Germany's first major defeat. The war expanded across continents. In September 1940, the North African campaign began and Italy invaded British Egypt. Meanwhile, in September 1940, Germany, Italy, and Japan signed the Tripartite Pact, solidifying their alliance. In September 1940, Japan invaded French Indochina, expanding its control in Southeast Asia and further escalating tensions in the Pacific. October 1940 to April 1941, the Greek army repelled an Italian invasion while the Balkan campaign intensified. In March 1941, the German Afrika Korps launched its offensive in North Africa, strengthening the Axis foothold in the region. April 1941, German, Hungarian, and Bulgarian forces launched invasions of Greece and Yugoslavia, quickly overcoming the resistance and further expanding Axis control. June 1941 marked the launch of Operation Barbarossa, the Axis invasion of the Soviet Union, beginning one of the deadliest campaigns in history. September 1941, the Siege of Leningrad begins, marking a brutal blockade by German forces that would last nearly 900 days. October 1941 to January 1942, the Battle of Moscow unfolds as Soviet forces mount a fierce defense, halting the German advance and marking a turning point in the Eastern Front. December 1941, Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, bringing the United States into the war. January to February 1942, Japan captures the Philippines and Singapore, expanding its dominance in the Pacific. January to August 1942, Operation Paukenschlag sees German U-boats launching their largest offensive in the Atlantic, targeting Allied shipping. May 1942, Germany secures a major victory against the Soviets at Kharkov, bolstering its Eastern Front campaign. June 1942, the US achieves a decisive victory over Japan at the Battle of Midway, shifting momentum in the Pacific. August 1942, the Battle of Stalingrad begins, marking a pivotal confrontation on the Eastern Front. November 1942, the British achieve a decisive victory at El Alamein, marking a turning point in the North African campaign. Shortly after, the Allies launch Operation Torch, marking the beginning of their invasion of North Africa. Meanwhile, the United States captures Guadalcanal from Japan, dealing a critical blow in the Pacific theater. February 1943, Soviet forces encircle the German army at Stalingrad, marking a turning point on the Eastern Front. In May of 1943, the Axis surrender in Tunisia, bringing the North African campaign to an end. August 1943, at the Battle of Kursk, Soviet forces halt a massive German offensive, marking another major turning point on the Eastern Front. In September of 1943, Italy surrenders to the Allies, and Mussolini is overthrown. January 1944, the German siege of Leningrad ends after more than 2 years, bringing relief to the beleaguered city. June 1944, D-Day. Allied forces storm the beaches of Normandy, opening a new front in Western Europe. Between June and August of 1944, Operation Bagration, a Soviet offensive, destroyed the German Army Group Center, significantly weakening the Nazi forces. August 1944, the Allies liberated Paris from German occupation, marking a major turning point in the war. December 1944, the Battle of the Bulge, the Wehrmacht's last major offensive in the West, took place in Belgium and Luxembourg. January 1945, Soviet forces occupied Warsaw, advancing deep into Nazi-occupied Eastern Europe. February 1945, the Yalta Conference took place, where Allied leaders met to discuss post-war Europe. In March 1945, the Allies invaded Germany, pushing towards the heart of the Nazi regime. In October 1944, the US and Australian combined navy defeated Japan at the Battle of Leyte Gulf, the largest naval battle in history. Between February and June of 1945, the United States captured the islands of Iwo Jima and Okinawa, bringing them closer to the Japanese mainland. April 1945. The Battle of Berlin took place, marking the Soviets' final offensive in Europe and the fall of Nazi Germany's capital. In April of 1945, Adolf Hitler committed suicide as Soviet forces closed in on Berlin. In May of 1945, Germany surrendered, and the Allies claimed victory in Europe. August 1945, Soviet forces invaded the Japanese puppet state of Manchukuo, preparing for the final assault on Japan. August of 1945, the United States dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, bringing Japan to the brink of surrender. In September of 1945, Japan formally surrendered, marking the end of World War II in the Pacific. As the war came to an end, the staggering loss of life became clear, a sobering reminder of the devastation. Approximately 24 million soldiers lost their lives during World War II, fighting on battlefields across the globe. But the war's toll didn't end there. An estimated 34 million civilians perished, their lives caught in the crossfire of history's deadliest conflict. World War II reshaped the course of humanity, leaving behind lessons of courage, sacrifice, and the heavy cost of war. Let us never forget these lessons as we continue to strive for a more peaceful world. If you found this timeline insightful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that bring history to life.